So good afternoon, everyone. I'm Lisa Early from the City of Orlando, and the subject of this keynote is building neighborhood capacity. So by way of background, the City of Orlando has operated a replication of Harlem Children's Zone since 2006. The neighborhood in Orlando is called Paramore, so the name of our program is Paramore Kids Zone, or PKZ. So why did we do it, and how did we get started? So it was 2003, and a new mayor was elected in Orlando. One of his key policy platforms was to improve child well-being in our city. So at the time, we talked to many local stakeholders. We wanted to know what direction they thought we should go in terms of improving child well-being. And one of the themes that we kept hearing over and over again was that they were tired of sort of these grandiose ideas about solving all the problems that Orlando's children face. They were tired of task forces that always devolve into committee meetings attended by the usual suspects, ultimately fizzling out after a year or so. They felt like the problems were too big. We would never have enough money to solve all the issues kids were facing. And it would be better if instead of doing that, we should start small. Start in one neighborhood or one school, develop a model there, prove that it works, and then scale it up. So that's when this article appeared on the cover of the New York Times Sunday magazine, and I'm going to pull it up for you. Bingo, the Harlem Project, Jeffrey Canada on the front page. It was June 20th, 2004. So I saw that and I'm like, oh my God, that's what everybody is telling us to do in Orlando. So in 2005, we sent a team to Harlem for a deep dive view of Harlem Children's Zone. And I really want to thank you, Jeff, for your hospitality and willingness to share all of the important work you've done, because it's made a huge difference here in Orlando. So after 2 years of planning and leveraging funds, we launched Paramore Kids Zone in July of 2006. So why did we pick Paramore? Well, we conducted a comprehensive analysis of demographic, academic, and child well-being data citywide throughout the city of Orlando. And data showed that Orlando's Paramore Heritage neighborhood was by far the most disadvantaged neighborhood in Orlando. So I'm going to give you some of the data at the time that drew us to select Paramore as our site to replicate Harlem Children's Zone. So at the time, 73% of the neighborhood's children were living below the federal poverty level, and 84% of them were in single parent households. Nearly half of the neighborhood's adults over the age of 25 didn't have either a high school diploma or GED. And the zip code in which Paramore is located had the highest reports of child abuse and neglect in the entire county, and the teen birth rate was 6 times that of the county. The juvenile arrest rate was 2.5 times that of the city and was far higher than any other neighborhood in the city. We also conducted a door-to-door neighborhood survey to get information from parents about their perspective on their children's needs. We randomly selected 100 households in the neighborhood. 86% of the parents reported that they ran out of money before the end of each month, and 32% of the children have lost a loved one in the past year. And the most common reason was the death or incarceration of a parent. 61% of the children from birth to age 5 weren't in any sort of childcare or preschool program, and 78% of parents said they needed more help for their children. We also carried out asset mapping in the neighborhood to see what kind of children's programs there were there. So I'm going to pull up onto the screen the map that we created at the time of children's programs in the neighborhood. Okay, so this was 2006, and Paramore is this gray shaded neighborhood here. It's about 1.4 miles from the north end of the neighborhood to the south end of the neighborhood, and it abuts the city's downtown business district right here. So what you see here at the time were these 3 red dots were 3 locations serving children in the neighborhood at the time. And the capacity of those 3 sites was to serve 30 children under the age of 5 and 200 children from kindergarten through 5th grade, and no children ages 11 and over, none. So that was the capacity at the time. All right. So going back to the presentation. So what have we done since then? So since 2006, we've invested about $3 million of city general revenue funds and grants that we've leveraged every year. So $3 million a year in 11 partner programs located throughout the neighborhood. And those investments are targeted to meet the following goals. Number 1, to increase the number of young children ages birth to 5 attending high quality early learning programs, to help build parenting skills through parenting education programs in the neighborhood, to mitigate family economic instability, to prevent homelessness, people being evicted from their homes, utilities, shutoffs, that sort of thing, to enhance children's physical health and wellness, to support the academic success of children in elementary, middle, and high school, and to increase the number of youth entering and completing post-secondary education, and to keep older youth out of trouble and on a positive track towards social and economic success, including operating robust youth development programs in the neighborhood and a highly successful youth employment program in the neighborhood. And over these many years, our Orlando team has visited Harlem Children's Zone many times, and Harlem Children's Zone staff have come to Orlando several times as well to provide technical assistance into many different aspects of our programming, including deep dives into the baby college, the student advocate model, and also building a culture of whatever it takes. And we've replicated all of these in Orlando. So we have what we call Paramore Kids Zone Baby Institute here. We have a student advocate program, and we are all about whatever it takes. So I'm going to pivot back to this asset map and show you today's asset map, what it looks like now. So let me pull that up on the screen. And here we go. So this is children's programs in Paramore today. And now you see 12 dots on the map. These are all locations throughout the neighborhood that we've invested in to scale up programming for children and youth ages birth to 25 throughout the neighborhood. And as you can see, this model is not about putting sort of one program in a neighborhood or a one-stop shop where everybody can go for everything. No, it's about investing throughout the neighborhood, everywhere in the neighborhood, in partners all over the place to serve children. And this is our capacity last year. This shows you the actual number of children provided services through Paramore Kids Zone through all of our partner locations. There were 134 children under the age of 5, 334 in kindergarten through 5th grade, and 669 children ages 11 through 25. So that is the capacity today. So results. So I'm going to now walk through this. And just so you know, we have been very data driven here, very focused on tracking the impact. You know, if the theory of change here is that if you make investments in evidence-based programs in a neighborhood and connect a critical mass of the neighborhood children to those programs, theoretically, you should see the needle move on things like juvenile crime, teen pregnancies, child abuse and neglect, academic performance of kids in the neighborhood. So we've been very intentional about tracking that in Orlando. And I am going to pull up some slides to show you the impact here. So let me, okay. So I talked about the survey we did in the neighborhood when we first started, and we've done that survey every 5 years to see if parents' responses change, if their view of the conditions children face has gotten better, worse, what's happened. So I'm just going to show you a couple of changes that we've seen. One of the questions we ask parents is, are your children getting into trouble in school? And you can see the change from 2007 to 2017. There's been a drop of 76% in terms of the number of parents who say their children are getting into trouble in school. 76% drop. And then one of the questions we ask is, does your child attend preschool? And you can see 117% increase in the percentage of children who birth to age 5 who attend preschool. We also track at the neighborhood level juvenile arrests. And this slide shows you the number of juvenile arrests in Paramore since we started the program. This is a drop of 78%. We also tracked teen births in the neighborhood. What you see here is a drop of 63% in terms of the number of births to teens in Paramore since we started the program. We track child abuse and neglect. This is a drop of 62% in terms of the number of verified cases of child abuse and neglect in Paramore since we started. And we track a number of different measures of academic performance. And you can see where we're at here. We track the percentage of middle and high school students who have a 2.0 GPA or above by the end of the school year. The percentage of middle school students who are promoted to the next grade level, the percentage of high school students promoted to the next grade level, and the percentage of 12th graders who go on to post-secondary. And you can see our percentages here. So it's been really a successful effort, and I highly recommend tracking data. It makes a big difference. So let me go back to presentation here. So the good news is that last year, 2020, the City of Orlando allocated $2.41 million annually to begin replicating Paramore Kids Zone in 3 additional Orlando neighborhoods. So, going back to the subject of this presentation, building capacity of neighborhood organizations, what were the lessons that we've learned in doing this? So, number one, I would say invest in credible messengers. Invest in the nascent capacity of the neighborhood, the people who are ready, organizations and individuals who are ready in the neighborhood, who have longstanding trusted relationships with at-promise youth in the neighborhood, and a legacy of effectively encouraging and supporting youth on the path to successful adulthood. This is more about investing in those entities than bringing in large, well-funded organizations into the neighborhood to start working with youth. And to do so, you have to often break from traditional systems of fund allocation, because the traditional systems are to issue requests for proposals, and typically the large, well-funded organizations are in a much better position to respond to those RFPs. They have grant writers, they have many years of fiscal information and outcome information that they can put into their proposals. And so when small grassroots entities try to compete with them, they don't have the capacity to compete with competitive RFPs. And often the small neighborhood organizations, some of them don't even have nonprofit status, so they don't even qualify to get funding. So you have to break from those traditional patterns, or you won't be able to invest in those sort of nascent grassroots credible messengers in the neighborhood. So the other recommendation is to hire youth from the neighborhood. This is one of the things we learned early on in our visits to Harlem Children's Zone. One of the things Jeff Canada always said, hire youth from the neighborhood. They need to run these programs. They need to take over these programs someday. And so we've been very, very intentional about that. And because we've been in Paramore now since 2006, we have many youth who are now age 26, 27, 28, 29, and they're actually hired into our programs and running our programs in the neighborhood. It makes all the difference in the world. And on that note, since we're working in neighborhoods that have traditionally had high arrest rates, a lot of the youth in the neighborhood have criminal backgrounds. A lot of the grassroots respected people with a long legacy of working in the neighborhood have criminal backgrounds, but a lot of our institutions like city government or nonprofits or entities that work with children have a lot of restrictions on who they hire, and they won't hire people who have criminal backgrounds. And so that's something that needs reform as well, because when you have people who come from the neighborhood, who have a passion for the neighborhood, who are trusted by people in the neighborhood, who want to come back to their neighborhoods and help raise up kids and prevent kids from their own neighborhoods from getting into the kind of trouble they got into, you have to be able to bring them back to do that work. So that's another thing that we've been reforming here in Orlando. I also recommend creating some form of a backbone structure to not only manage the collective impact of all of the entities working together, but to support those grassroots partners in functions like data management. So for instance, in Orlando, we have a centralized database that the city manages, and all of our small partner nonprofits are able to use that database to manage their own data. And so we have this sort of collective process for that. We also do marketing for them, so we get the word out about their programs. And we also leverage and manage grant funds and then distribute those grants to them in the neighborhood. And then the last thing I would say is data, data, data. If it weren't for having this data, we could not prove that this model works, which has enabled us to sustain it every year, continue to get city funding, get grant funding, and then ultimately now be able to replicate the program in other neighborhoods. Lastly, how has this work contributed to broader systems change? And I'll talk here locally in our community of Orlando. We were the first in Orlando to create a neighborhood-based model. Traditionally, our community had spread money out widely across entire systems and not really had a focus on the neighborhoods where conditions for children were the worst. And so what we've seen here in Orlando is that local funders have incrementally been pivoting away from investment in community-wide programs to investment in neighborhood programs, with neighborhoods selected based on the demographic and child well-being data. They've also pivoted away from investment in these sort of very generic, watered-down programs offering generic services to children, to being very intentional about funding programs that are proven to impact children's academic success, to impact juvenile crime from cradle to career. So it's been much more targeted, impactful investment. They've also pivoted away from investment in sort of these large, well-funded nonprofits towards investment in small grassroots entities, credible messengers, those who have a legacy of effectively engaging youth in the target neighborhoods. So thank you, so much. And I do want to now close this out by pulling up on my screen some photos from way back in the day when we first started Paramore Kid Zone. We took a group of youth from the Paramore community. We've put them all on a plane and we flew up to New York and gave them a full-blown tour of New York City. And as part of that, we took them up to Harlem and visited with Harlem Children's Zone. Those are all of our youth there with Mr. Canada in the center. And it was 2008 and our youth went with Harlem Children's Zone youth on the Harlem Children's Zone Peace March. So thank you for that. Thank you for making this happen in Orlando, for informing people around the whole country about this model. It's made a big difference in our community. I know it's made a big difference in other communities. And we are so appreciative of the work. And let's keep moving ahead. We've got a lot of work to do. Thank you.